There is a moment just before sleep takes you completely, when the body forgets itself. The room grows soft around its edges. The sounds of the waking world, a distant car, the hum of something electrical, the settling of walls, become whispers from another country. Your breathing deepens. Your limbs grow heavy against the sheets. And then, without warning, the ground beneath you vanishes. You are falling. The sensation is absolute, a plummeting through darkness, through space that has no name. Your heart lurches, your muscles seize, and in that breathless instant before you jolt awake, gasping, clutching at blankets that suddenly feel like the only solid thing in the universe, you wonder, what was that? Where was I going? People have been asking this question for as long as there have been people. In firelit caves and palace bedchambers, in desert tents and mountain monasteries, in every corner of every continent across every century, human beings have startled awake from dreams of falling and turned their faces toward the darkness, searching for meaning. Some say the falling dream is a warning. Others call it a doorway. Some believe it carries messages from ancestors, from gods, from the deepest wells of the unconscious mind, and some simply wonder if there is something ancient within us, some memory written into muscle and bone, that still recalls a time when falling meant everything. Tonight, let us descend together into this mystery. Let us follow the falling dreamers through history and across cultures, and see what truths might wait for us at the bottom of the dark. But before that, comment down below which country you are watching from. Perhaps you know the feeling. You are drifting downward into sleep, that delicious heaviness spreading through your body like warm water when suddenly, without any warning at all, the world drops out from beneath you. Your legs kick, your arms fly outward. Your heart hammers against your ribs, as if you have just narrowly escaped something terrible, and then you are awake again, blinking in the darkness, wondering what on earth just happened. This strange little convulsion has a name, though it sounds more clinical than the experience deserves. Scientists call it a hypnojerk, or sometimes a hypnagogic jerk, or a sleep start. The language of laboratories does not quite capture the strangeness of it, that peculiar sensation of falling through a trap door that was not there a moment before, of being betrayed by the very threshold of sleep. It is remarkably common. Some researchers believe that as many as 70% of people experience these sudden jerks at some point in their lives. Children seem to have them more frequently than adults, perhaps 4 to 7 times per hour during certain stages of development, while the elderly report them less often, as if the body slowly forgets this ancient reflex over the long years of a life. But nearly everyone, at some point, has felt that strange lurch at the edge of consciousness, that momentary conviction that the bed has disappeared and left nothing but empty air. The curious thing is that no one is entirely certain why it happens. There are theories, of course. There are always theories. One suggests that the hypnic jerk is simply a misfire in the nervous system, a brief confusion in the reticular brainstem as the body transitions from wakefulness to sleep. The muscles relax. The brain, monitoring this sudden letting go, misinterprets the signals. It reads the loosening of the limbs as evidence of falling, and so it sends an urgent command: catch yourself. Wake up, you are in danger. Another theory reaches further back, into the deep evolutionary past. Picture, if you will, your most distant ancestors, not the humans who built fires and painted caves, but the earlier ones, the small primates who slept in trees. For them, falling asleep was a genuinely dangerous business. To relax too completely on a branch meant risking a tumble to the forest floor where predators waited in the darkness. And so, perhaps, the brain developed a kind of safety check, a sudden jerk to test the stability of the sleeping position, to ensure that the body was secure before consciousness fully departed. Some researchers have suggested that this is why the hypnojerk persists even now, millions of years after we descended from the trees and made our beds on solid ground. The reflex remains written into us, a ghostly reminder of dangers we no longer face. When your body startles you awake at the edge of sleep, it may be responding to a threat that vanished from the world long before the first human opened their eyes. There is something almost touching about this idea, that buried within us, beneath all our modern concerns and complexities, there lives a small ancient creature still worried about falling from branches in the night. But the hypnic jerk, for all its strangeness, is not quite the same thing as a falling dream. The jerk happens at the border of sleep, in that liminal moment when you are neither fully awake nor fully unconscious. The falling dream is something else entirely. It occurs deeper in the night, during the vivid theatre of REM sleep. when the brain is fully engaged in its mysterious work of dreaming. And while the hypnic jerk lasts only an instant, a single startled convulsion, the falling dream can stretch on, a long plummet through darkness that seems to have no end. People describe these dreams in remarkably similar ways, regardless of where they come from or when they lived. There is the sudden loss of ground. There is the sensation of dropping through empty space, sometimes from a great height, sometimes from nowhere in particular, sometimes through clouds or stars or absolute blackness. There is often a feeling of helplessness, of having no control over the descent, and there is almost always that moment of terrible anticipation, the awareness that the ground is coming, that impact is inevitable, that something is about to happen. And then, more often than not, the dreamer wakes. They wake just before they hit the bottom, just before the story reaches its conclusion. They wake with their heart pounding and their breath caught in their throat, and they lie there in the darkness, waiting for the fear to fade, wondering what it all meant. This is the mystery that has haunted human beings for thousands of years. Not just the fact of the falling dream, but its meaning. Why do we dream of falling? What is the mind trying to tell us when it sends us plummeting through the dark? Is it a warning, a prophecy, a message from some deeper part of ourselves that we have forgotten how to hear? The answers people have found to these questions are as varied as humanity itself. They stretch across centuries and continents, through temples and laboratories, through the whispered wisdom of grandmothers and the careful notations of scholars. Some are strange, some are beautiful, some contradict each other entirely, but all of them share a common thread, the conviction that dreams matter, that they mean something, that the falling sensation is not random noise but a kind of language waiting to be understood. In ancient Mesopotamia more than 4,000 years ago, priests kept careful records of dreams on clay tablets. They believed that the gods spoke to mortals through the imagery of sleep, sending warnings and prophecies wrapped in symbols. A king who dreamed of falling might consult these tablets, searching for guidance about what the vision portended. The dream was not merely a personal experience. It was a communication from powers beyond the human world, demanding interpretation and response. The Egyptians too took dreams with profound seriousness. They built special temples where people could go to sleep in sacred spaces, hoping to receive divine messages in their dreams. Priests trained in the art of interpretation would help the dreamers understand what they had seen. A papyrus known as the Ramesside Dream Book, dating back more than 3,000 years, contains lists of dream images and their meanings. A kind of dictionary for the language of sleep. To dream for the ancient Egyptians was to open a door between the world of the living and the world of spirits, ancestors and gods. And in ancient Greece, the philosopher Artemidorus spent years travelling the Mediterranean world, collecting dreams and their interpretations from people of every station and circumstance. His great work, the Onira Critica, written in the 2nd century of the Common Era, remains one of the most comprehensive dream interpretation texts to survive from the ancient world. In it, he recorded that falling in a dream could symbolize many things: the loss of something important, a coming change in circumstances, the end of a particular phase of life. But he was careful to note that the meaning of any dream depended on the dreamer, their situation, their concerns, their position in the world. A falling dream meant one thing to a merchant and another to a soldier, one thing to a young bride and another to an aging king. What strikes the modern reader looking back across these centuries is not how different these ancient dreamers were from us, but how similar. They too startled awake in the darkness. They too felt that strange mix of fear and wonder that comes from having visited somewhere that does not quite exist. They too asked the question that we still ask today: what does it mean when you dream of falling? Perhaps the answer is that human beings have always needed meaning. We are creatures who cannot help but search for patterns, for stories, for explanations that make sense of our experience. And there is no experience quite as strange, quite as intimate, quite as universal as the dream. Every night we close our eyes and travel to a country that no one else can see. Every night we become the authors of impossible stories, the witnesses to events that never happened. And every night sometimes we fall. The falling dream may be one of the oldest dreams there is. It may be woven into the very fabric of what it means to be human, a shared inheritance from our earliest ancestors, a common thread connecting us to everyone who has ever lived and slept and wondered at the strangeness of the sleeping mind. And so we ask the question. We have always asked the question. We will probably always ask it, as long as there are people to dream and to wonder. What does it mean when you dream of falling? Let us travel further into the mystery and see what answers we might find. Long before the modern world learned to speak of the unconscious mind, before laboratories measured the electrical rhythms of sleeping brains, human beings understood that dreams came from somewhere else. They arrived unbidden, these nightly visitors, bearing images that could not be explained by the waking day. And so people did what people have always done when faced with mystery. They told stories about it. In ancient Greece, they said that dreams were not made inside the sleeper at all. They came from outside, slipping through the darkness like messengers from another realm. The Greeks gave them a name, the Weneroi, and said they were the children of Nyx, the goddess of night. These dream spirits lived in a dark cave at the edge of the world, where the sun never reached and silence pooled like black water. Each night they rose from their dwelling place and travelled to the beds of mortals, bringing visions that could illuminate or deceive, comfort or terrify. The poet Homer, whose words have echoed through nearly 3,000 years, described 2 gates through which these dreams must pass before reaching the sleeping world. One gate was made of polished horn, and through it came dreams that were true, prophecies and warnings that would come to pass exactly as they were shown. The other gate was made of ivory, smooth and beautiful, and through it came dreams that were false, lovely illusions that meant nothing, stories that would dissolve in the light of morning. The Greeks loved this image with its elegant wordplay. In their language, the word for horn sounded like the word for fulfill, while the word for ivory echoed the word for deceive. The gates themselves seemed to speak, warning dreamers that not every vision could be trusted, that the sleeping mind was a place where truth and falsehood mingled freely. And here, perhaps, is the first great question that falling dreams have always raised. Is this a dream from the gate of horn or the gate of ivory? Does this plunge through darkness mean something? Or is it merely the mind's idle chatter signifying nothing? The ancient world leaned heavily toward meaning. Dreams were too strange, too vivid, too full of impossible things to be dismissed as random noise. When a king dreamed of falling from a great height, his advisors took notice. When a general saw himself tumbling from the walls of a city he planned to besiege, he reconsidered his strategy. When an ordinary farmer woke in the night with the sensation of dropping through endless darkness, he wondered what the gods were trying to tell him. The Romans inherited this reverence for dreams and added their own interpretations. They too believed that the divine spoke through sleep, that dreams could foretell the future or reveal hidden truths about the present. But they also began to notice something that would echo through the centuries. Certain dreams seemed to occur again and again across different dreamers in different circumstances, with remarkable consistency. The dream of falling was one of these. It appeared in the dream journals of emperors and the whispered confidences of slaves. It visited the beds of philosophers and soldiers, mothers and children, the very old and the very young. Wherever people slept, it seemed, some of them dreamed of falling. And wherever people dreamed of falling, they woke with the same questions burning in their minds. Artemidorus, that great collector of dreams, devoted careful attention to the falling dream in his Onero Critica. He noted that to dream of falling could signify many things, depending on the circumstances of the fall and the life of the dreamer. Falling from a great height might indicate a loss of status or position, a warning that something the dreamer had built was about to crumble beneath them. Falling into water suggested emotional turbulence, a plunge into feelings that threatened to overwhelm. Falling and being caught by someone might mean that help would arrive in a time of need, while falling alone through empty darkness could indicate isolation, abandonment, the sense of having no one to rely upon. But Artemidorus was careful to emphasize that no dream could be interpreted in isolation. The meaning of falling depended on who was doing the falling, what they were falling from, how they felt during the descent, and what awaited them at the bottom. A sailor who dreamed of falling into the sea would understand the image differently than a merchant who dreamed of falling from his counting house. A new bride who dreamed of falling from her marriage bed would carry different anxieties than a soldier who dreamed of falling from the walls of a fortress. This insistence on context, on the individual life of the dreamer, was revolutionary in its own quiet way. It suggested that dreams were not simply divine telegrams to be decoded according to a fixed key, but something more personal, more intimate, more responsive to the particular contours of each human life. The falling dream meant something, yes, but what it meant depended on who you were, where you stood, what you feared, what you hoped for. Centuries passed, empires rose and fell. The old gods faded into myth. A new faith spread across the lands where Greeks and Romans had once dreamed their prophetic dreams, but the falling dream persisted, appearing in the sleep of medieval monks and Renaissance princes, of pilgrims and peasants, of anyone who closed their eyes and let consciousness slip away. In the great monotheistic traditions that came to dominate much of the world, dreams retained their sacred significance, though their interpretations shifted to accommodate new theological frameworks. The Hebrew scriptures were full of dreamers, Jacob with his ladder stretching up to heaven, Joseph interpreting the dreams of Pharaoh, Daniel reading the nightmares of Babylonian kings. Dreams were channels through which the divine could communicate with humanity, windows that opened onto truths too large for ordinary perception. The Islamic tradition too held dreams in high regard. The Prophet Muhammad himself was said to have received significant visions in sleep, and Islamic scholars developed sophisticated systems for interpreting dreams according to their spiritual significance. A falling dream might be understood as a warning from Allah, a call to examine one's life and return to the righteous path. To dream of falling from a mountain could indicate that the dreamer had strayed from their spiritual direction, that something had thrown them off the course that led toward the divine. To dream of falling into darkness might suggest confusion, a loss of spiritual clarity, the need for prayer and reflection to find one's way back to the light. Ibn Sirin, the great Islamic dream interpreter of the 8th century, wrote that falling in a dream could mean despair or disappointment, or perhaps a mistake that could not be easily corrected. But he also noted that the outcome of the fall mattered enormously. To fall and land safely suggested that the dreamer would recover from whatever difficulty they faced. To fall into a pleasant place, a garden, a gathering of friends, a banquet, might actually be a positive omen, indicating that what seemed like loss would lead to unexpected blessing. This attention to the ending of the fall, to what waited at the bottom of the descent, appears again and again in dream interpretation traditions around the world. The fall itself might be frightening, but it was not necessarily catastrophic. Everything depended on how the story concluded, or, in the case of so many falling dreams, on the fact that it did not conclude at all, that the dream awoke before the moment of impact. Why do we wake before we hit the ground? This question has haunted falling dreamers for generations. There is an old folk belief, still repeated in some places, that to hit the bottom in a falling dream means to die in real life, that the shock of impact would be so great that the heart would simply stop. This is, by all scientific accounts, nonsense. People have reported dreams in which they fell and landed, sometimes with considerable force, and woke no worse for the experience. The heart goes on beating. The morning comes as it always does. And yet the belief persists, perhaps because it captures something true about the feeling of these dreams. There is something about the falling dream that touches on mortality, on the fragility of existence, on the terrifying fact that all of us are, in some sense, always falling, through time, through life, toward an ending we cannot see. The ancient Greeks understood this. The medieval monks understood it. The Islamic scholars and the Hebrew prophets understood it. To dream of falling is to dream of the human condition itself, the vertiginous awareness that we are not entirely in control, that the ground beneath us is never quite as solid as we would like to believe. Perhaps this is why the falling dream has proven so universal, so persistent across cultures and centuries. It speaks to something fundamental in the experience of being human, the knowledge that we are vulnerable, that we can lose our footing, that life is precarious and uncertain no matter how carefully we try to secure our place in the world. The ancients looked at this dream and saw messages from the gods. They saw warnings about pride and prophecies about fate. They saw the gates of horn and ivory swinging open in the darkness, releasing visions that might be true or false, significant or meaningless. And we, their distant descendants, still wake in the night with our hearts pounding and our hands clutching at empty air, still asking the same questions they asked, still searching for meaning in the sensation of falling through the dark. The gates remain open, the dreams keep coming, and we keep falling night after night, century after century, reaching for something solid to hold on to, wondering if we will ever find the ground. In the high mountains of Tibet, where the air grows thin and the monasteries cling to cliff sides like prayer flags caught in stone, there is a teaching about the nature of falling. The Buddhist monks who have meditated in these remote places for centuries say that to fall in a dream is to be reminded of something the waking mind prefers to forget, that nothing is permanent, that all things change, that the self we cling to so desperately is itself a kind of illusion, always slipping away, always in motion, never quite as solid as it seems. This is not a frightening teaching, though it might sound that way at first. The monks speak of it with a kind of gentle amusement, the way one might speak to a child who is afraid of shadows. Yes, you are falling, they seem to say. You have always been falling. Everyone is falling. The question is not how to stop the fall, that is impossible, but how to fall with grace, with awareness, with an open heart. In the Hindu traditions that flowered in the valleys below those mountains, falling dreams carry a different but related significance. Some teachers say that to dream of falling is to experience in miniature the journey of the soul through samsara, the great wheel of birth, death and rebirth that turns endlessly until liberation is achieved. The soul falls from one life into another, from one form into the next, tumbling through existence until it finally awakens to its true nature and steps free of the wheel entirely. To fall in a dream, then, is to be given a glimpse of this cosmic process. It is to feel, for a moment, the vertigo of existence itself, the dizzying truth that we are not fixed beings, but flowing ones. Not permanent structures, but temporary configurations of consciousness moving through an inconceivably vast universe. The fall is not a punishment or a warning, it is simply what is. It is the nature of things. These Eastern perspectives offer something quite different from the prophetic dreams of the ancient Mediterranean world. They are less concerned with specific messages, what will happen tomorrow, what the gods are trying to tell you, and more interested in the fundamental texture of experience itself. A falling dream is not a puzzle to be solved, but a truth to be recognized. It does not point towards some future event, it illuminates the present moment, reminding the dreamer of realities that are always true but rarely noticed. Far from the monasteries of Asia, in the vast and varied landscapes of Africa, other traditions have developed their own ways of understanding what happens when the sleeping soul takes flight, and sometimes falls. Across the diverse cultures of the continent, from the Yoruba people of West Africa, to the Dagara of Burkina Faso, to the countless other peoples who have made their homes in forest and savanna, desert and coastline, dreams have long been understood as bridges between worlds. The ancestors speak through dreams. This is a belief so widespread, so deeply rooted, that it appears in variations across hundreds of different African cultures and languages. When you sleep, the veil between the living and the dead grows thin. Those who have passed beyond can reach through that veil to offer guidance, warnings, comfort, or correction. A dream is not merely a private experience, it is a communication, a visitation, a moment of contact with those who watch over the living from the other side. In this context, a falling dream might carry profound significance. Among the Yoruba, some practitioners say that to dream of falling is a sign that spiritual balance has been disturbed, that something in the dreamer's relationship with the unseen world requires attention. The fall is not random, it is a message, a nudge from forces that care about the dreamer's well-being. The proper response is not simply to wonder what the dream meant, but to take action, to consult with elders or diviners, to make offerings, to examine one's life for sources of disharmony and address them. The Akan people of Ghana might interpret a falling dream as a sign of vulnerability, an indication that the dreamer is exposed to external threats or has somehow weakened their spiritual protections. The fall suggests that something has slipped, that the dreamer's footing in the world, both seen and unseen, is not as secure as it should be. Again, the dream calls for response, rituals to restore protection, consultations with those who can see what ordinary eyes cannot, a recommitment to the practices that keep a person anchored in the web of relationships that sustain human life. What strikes the observer about these African traditions is how communal they are. A dream is not simply a private message to be pondered in solitude. It is an event that ripples outward into family and community. Dreams are shared, discussed, interpreted together. When someone dreams of falling, others gather to help make sense of it. The meaning emerges not from a book or a fixed system of symbols, but from conversation, from the accumulated wisdom of elders, from the particular circumstances of the dreamer's life as known by those who love them. This communal approach to dreams stands in marked contrast to the more individualistic frameworks that have come to dominate in many modern Western societies, but it is not unique to Africa. Similar patterns appear in indigenous cultures around the world, from the Pacific Islands to the Americas. Wherever people have maintained traditional ways of understanding the relationship between waking and sleeping, between the visible world and the invisible one. Among some Native American peoples, dreams have long been understood as doorways to spiritual transformation. The vision quest, a practice found in various forms across many different nations, often involves deliberately seeking powerful dreams through fasting, solitude, and prayer. The dreams that come during such quests are understood as profound communications, encounters with spiritual forces that can shape the direction of an entire life. In this context, a falling dream might be seen not as a warning of danger but as an invitation to change. Some traditions speak of falling dreams as signs that transformation is underway, that the dreamer is being called to release old ways of being and embrace something new. The fall is not a catastrophe, it is a passage, a necessary descent that precedes emergence into a different state of existence. There is a story, much repeated though its precise origins are difficult to trace, about the Senoi people of the Malaysian highlands. According to accounts that circulated widely in the 20th century, the Senoi developed a remarkable practice of dream education. Children were taught from an early age to engage with their dreams consciously, to confront rather than flee from frightening imagery, to transform nightmare into adventure, and falling dreams held a special place in this teaching. When a Senoi child reported dreaming of falling, the elders did not offer comfort or reassurance. Instead, they offered instruction. Do not resist the fall. Do not try to wake yourself. Relax into the descent and see where it takes you. The falling spirits love you, they said. They are attracting you to their land. If you can learn to fall without fear, you will discover that falling is actually the quickest way to travel, the fastest route to the realms of power and possibility that lie hidden in the dream world. Let yourself fall, the elders advised, and you may find that you learn to fly. Whether the Senoi actually practiced dream education in exactly this way has been debated by scholars. Some researchers who visited the highlands in later decades found little evidence of the elaborate dream-sharing rituals that earlier accounts had described. The truth of the matter may never be fully known, but the idea itself, the notion that falling dreams could be transformed from nightmares into gifts, from experiences of terror into opportunities for discovery, captured the imagination of people around the world and has influenced approaches to dreaming ever since. There is something deeply appealing about this teaching, regardless of its historical accuracy. It suggests that we are not helpless in the face of our dreams, that even in sleep we have choices, that the meaning of a falling dream depends in part on how we respond to it. If we wake in terror, the dream becomes a nightmare. If we surrender to the fall, it might become something else entirely. A journey, an initiation, a doorway to depths we could not otherwise reach. This idea echoes through many traditions, though it is expressed in different ways. The Tibetan Buddhists speak of learning to recognize the dream state while dreaming, to become aware that one is asleep and thereby gain a measure of freedom within the dream. The lucid dreamers of the modern West have developed techniques for achieving similar awareness, for taking conscious control of dreams that might otherwise be frightening or chaotic. And in all these approaches there is a common thread, the belief that dreams are not simply things that happen to us, but experiences we can learn to navigate, territories we can learn to explore. The falling dream in this light becomes a kind of test, not a test imposed by gods or ancestors, but a test of our own relationship to fear, to uncertainty, to the unknown. How do we respond when the ground disappears? Do we panic and flail? Do we wake ourselves to escape the discomfort? Or do we find some other way, some willingness to remain present with the experience, to see where the fall might lead? The answer perhaps reveals something about how we live our waking lives as well, for we are always falling in one sense or another. We are always in motion, always changing, always moving towards futures we cannot fully see. The question the falling dream asks is the question life itself asks. Can you trust the process? Can you let go of the need for solid ground? Can you fall without losing yourself entirely? The ancestors and the monks, the diviners and the dream teachers, have all offered their answers to these questions, and we, in our own time, continue to ask them, night after night, as we close our eyes and begin the descent into sleep. In the gaslit parlours of 19th century Vienna, a new way of thinking about dreams was beginning to take shape. The old frameworks, divine messages, ancestral visitations, prophetic visions, had not disappeared entirely, but they had been pushed to the margins of educated discourse. The age of science had arrived, and with it came new questions about the nature of the mind and the meaning of its nightly wanderings. Sigmund Freud, a young physician with an interest in the mysterious ailments of the nervous system, began to suspect that dreams were not random noise or divine intervention, but something else entirely, communications from a hidden part of the self. a vast unconscious realm that operated according to its own logic, pursuing its own agenda, largely unknown to the waking mind. In his landmark work, The Interpretation of Dreams, published at the very cusp of the 20th century, Freud proposed that dreams were the royal road to the unconscious, a pathway into depths of the psyche that could not be accessed any other way. Every dream, he argued, was a disguised fulfillment of a wish, usually a wish so troubling or forbidden that the conscious mind could not acknowledge it directly. The strange imagery of dreams, their bizarre juxtapositions and impossible events, were the result of a kind of internal censorship, a scrambling of the true meaning to make it palatable to the sleeping self. And what of the falling dream? Freud had thoughts about this as well, though they were characteristically focused on the desires and anxieties he believed lurked beneath all human experience. He suggested that falling dreams might be connected to memories of early childhood, specifically to the physical sensations of being lifted and dropped playfully by parents or caregivers. The child experiences a thrilling mix of fear and excitement as they are tossed in the air and caught again. This memory, buried deep in the unconscious, resurfaces in dreams of falling, carrying with it echoes of those primal feelings. But Freud also connected falling to anxiety about loss of control, about the stability of one's position in life, about the ever-present fear of failure and disgrace. To fall, in Freudian terms, was to lose one's footing in the social and psychological structures that supported the self. It was to be exposed, vulnerable, tumbling towards consequences that could not be avoided. The falling dream expressed in the symbolic language of the unconscious, fears that the waking mind preferred not to examine too closely. Not everyone agreed with Freud's interpretations, of course. His own student and eventual rival, Carl Gustav Jung, developed a quite different understanding of dreams and their significance. Where Freud saw disguised wishes and repressed desires, Jung saw something more expansive, a psyche that was not merely personal but connected to vast collective depths, drawing on imagery and patterns shared by all humanity. Jung called these shared patterns archetypes, primordial images that appeared in dreams, myths, and fairy tales across all cultures and all periods of history. The hero's journey, the wise old man, the shadow self, the great mother. These were not individual inventions but common inheritance, part of what Jung called the collective unconscious, a deep stratum of the mind that belonged to the species as a whole. In Jung's framework, the falling dream took on new dimensions of meaning. It was not simply a personal anxiety about failure or a buried memory of childhood play. It was an encounter with something universal, a confrontation with the archetype of descent, of the journey downward into the unknown, of the necessary plunge into darkness that precedes transformation and rebirth. Jung noted that myths from around the world are full of descents, heroes who journey to the underworld, seekers who must go down before they can rise up, initiates who pass through symbolic death to achieve new life. The falling dream, he suggested, might be understood as a personal version of this archetypal journey. The dreamer is not simply losing control, they are being drawn downward towards something, called into depths that the conscious mind cannot yet comprehend. This did not make the dream less frightening necessarily. Archetypal experiences often carry tremendous emotional charge, but it did suggest that the falling dream might be meaningful in a different way than Freud had proposed, not as a symptom of neurosis, but as a call to growth, an invitation to explore dimensions of the self that had remained hidden or neglected. Jung was particularly interested in what happened when dreamers allowed themselves to engage with the imagery of their dreams, rather than simply analyzing it from a distance. He developed a technique he called active imagination, in which the dreamer would return to the dream in waking consciousness and continue the story, interacting with the images, following where they led. A falling dream approached in this way might become something quite different, not just a frightening plunge, but the beginning of a journey, a descent that led somewhere, a fall that opened into new territory. As the 20th century progressed, the study of dreams became increasingly scientific. Researchers developed new technologies for observing the sleeping brain, mapping its electrical activity, identifying the stages of sleep through which dreamers cycled each night. The discovery of REM sleep, that period of rapid eye movement during which the most vivid dreams occur, opened new avenues of investigation. For the first time, scientists could observe dreams happening in real time, could wake sleepers at precise moments and ask what they had been experiencing, could begin to build an empirical picture of this most mysterious of human activities. What they found, among many other things, was that falling dreams were remarkably common. Studies suggested that the majority of people, perhaps 60 to 70%, had experienced at least one falling dream in their lives. Many reported them as recurring experiences, dreams that returned again and again over the course of years or decades, sometimes unchanged, sometimes varying in their details but consistent in their essential quality of groundless descent. Researchers began to notice patterns. Falling dreams seemed to occur more frequently during periods of stress or transition. People going through major life changes, starting new jobs, ending relationships, facing significant challenges, often reported an increase in dreams of falling. This suggested that the old intuition might be correct. Falling dreams were connected, somehow, to feelings of instability, to the sense that the ground beneath one's life was shifting, to anxiety about outcomes that could not be controlled. But correlation is not causation, as scientists are fond of reminding us. The fact that stressed people dream more often of falling does not tell us why the falling dream takes the form it does, or what function it might serve, or whether it is simply a symptom of distress or something more purposeful. These questions remain open, the subject of ongoing research and debate. Some contemporary researchers have suggested that dreams, including falling dreams, may serve a kind of emotional processing function. The sleeping brain, freed from the demands of waking reality, works through the feelings and experiences of the day, integrating them into memory, making sense of them, preparing the dreamer to face whatever comes next. A falling dream, in this view, might be the mind's way of processing feelings of vulnerability, of rehearsing scenarios of loss so that the dreamer is better prepared to handle them if they occur. Others have proposed that dreams serve no particular function at all, that they are simply byproducts of the brain's activity during sleep, random firings of neurons that the meaning-seeking mind tries to weave into coherent stories. In this view, the falling dream is no more significant than any other dream. It feels meaningful because we are creatures who cannot help but find meaning even in noise. But there is another perspective, one that has gained increasing attention in recent decades. This view holds that dreams are not simply passive experiences, but active creations, shaped by the dreamer's expectations, beliefs, and intentions. The work of researchers like Stephen LaBerge on lucid dreaming, the state in which the dreamer becomes aware that they are dreaming and can exercise some degree of control over the dream's content, has suggested that the boundary between waking and dreaming consciousness may be more permeable than previously thought. What would it mean to become lucid in a falling dream? Those who have practiced this art report remarkable experiences. The terror of the fall gives way to something else, curiosity perhaps, or even exhilaration, when the dreamer realizes that they are dreaming, that the fall is not real, that no actual harm can come to them. The whole quality of the experience shifts. Some report that they are able to slow the fall, to guide their descent, to land gently in places they could never have imagined. Others find that the fall transforms into flight, that by releasing their fear they discover they have the power to soar. These reports echo in striking ways the teachings attributed to the Senoi and to various contemplative traditions around the world. They suggest that our relationship to the falling dream is not fixed, that we have more agency in the dream world than we might suppose, that the meaning of the fall depends in part on how we choose to meet it. Freud looked at the falling dream and saw the anxious unconscious, struggling with fears it could not name. Jung looked at the same dream and saw the call to descend, the archetypal journey into necessary darkness. The scientist looked and saw neural activity, emotional processing, the brain at work on its nightly maintenance. The lucid dreamers looked and saw opportunity, a chance to transform terror into wonder. Perhaps all of them were right in their own ways. Perhaps the falling dream is capacious enough to hold all these meanings and more. Perhaps it is precisely the kind of experience that cannot be reduced to a single explanation, that reveals different facets depending on who is looking and what questions they bring. What seems clear is that the falling dream has lost none of its power to fascinate and disturb. Despite all our scientific advances, despite brain scans and sleep studies and decades of psychological research, we still wake in the night with the sensation of having just escaped a terrible plunge, and we still ask the question that humans have always asked: what does it mean? The doctors of the mind have offered their answers, but the mystery, it seems, remains. There is a moment that happens to nearly everyone, though we rarely speak of it. You are sitting in a chair, perhaps in a warm room after a long day, and you begin to drift. The book in your hands grows heavy. The conversation around you fades to a pleasant murmur. Your eyelids lower, and for just an instant you are somewhere else entirely, and then your whole body jerks, a sudden violent twitch that snaps you back to waking with your heart racing and your hands grasping at nothing. It is such a common experience that we barely think about it. We shake our heads, perhaps laugh at ourselves and return to whatever we were doing. But if we pause to consider what just happened, something strange emerges. Our body, in that half second between waking and sleeping, believed it was falling. It responded as if to a genuine emergency, firing muscles and flooding the bloodstream with the chemistry of alarm. And then, just as quickly, it realized its mistake, if mistake it was, and let the tension go. The hypnic jerk, that mysterious spasm at the threshold of sleep, reminds us that the falling dream is not only a phenomenon of the mind, it lives in the body as well. Whatever the falling dream means psychologically, spiritually, symbolically, it is also a physical experience, felt in the gut and the limbs, in the racing pulse and the caught breath. The body does not distinguish between the fall that happens in a dream and the fall that happens in waking life. It responds to both with the same ancient reflexes, the same surge of adrenaline, the same desperate attempt to catch itself before it is too late. This bodily dimension of the falling dream has fascinated researchers for decades. Why does the sleeping body react so strongly to imaginary events? Why does the heart pound as if in genuine danger? Why do we wake from falling dreams, not just with memories of falling, but with physical sensations? Sweating palms, tense muscles, the unmistakable feeling of having narrowly escaped something terrible. Part of the answer lies in the architecture of the brain itself. During REM sleep, when the most vivid dreams occur, the brain becomes remarkably active. In some ways more active than during waking life. The visual cortex lights up with imagery. The emotional centers of the brain, particularly the amygdala, become highly engaged. The logical planning parts of the brain, by contrast, quiet down considerably. We are in a sense all feeling and image, with very little of the rational oversight that normally keeps our emotions in check. At the same time, the brain sends signals to the body that paralyze most voluntary muscles. This temporary paralysis, known as atonia, prevents us from acting out our dreams, from running and jumping and fighting in our beds while we run and jump and fight in our minds. It is a protective mechanism, keeping us safe from ourselves during the wild adventures of the night. But the paralysis is not complete. The muscles of the face can still move slightly. The eyes dart back and forth beneath closed lids, the rapid eye movements that give REM sleep its name, and certain deep bodily responses governed by the autonomic nervous system continue unimpeded. The heart can still race, the breath can still quicken, the body can still flood with the hormones of fear or excitement, responding to dream events as if they were really happening. This is why the falling dream feels so real, so physical, so viscerally terrifying. The brain is generating the experience of falling with all the vividness at its command, and the body is responding accordingly. The only thing missing is the actual fall, and the sleeping self, caught up in the immediacy of the experience, does not know to make that distinction. Some researchers have suggested that the falling dream may be connected to the body's vestibular system, the delicate apparatus in the inner ear that governs our sense of balance and spatial orientation. When we lie down to sleep, the vestibular system must recalibrate. The inputs it receives from the body shift dramatically. The usual cues about up and down, stable and unstable, become ambiguous or absent. In this state of sensory uncertainty, the brain may be more likely to generate sensations of movement, of tilting, of falling through space. This would help explain why falling dreams often occur at the transitions into and out of sleep, when the body's position is changing and the vestibular system is most actively adjusting. It would also explain why the hypnic jerk, that sudden twitch at sleep's edge, so often comes with a sensation of falling. The brain, uncertain of the body's actual position, may be filling in the gaps with its best guess, and sometimes that guess involves a sudden drop through empty air. But this physical explanation, compelling as it is, does not seem to capture the full reality of the falling dream. The dreams that people remember, the ones that wake them in the night and linger in memory for years afterward, are not simply sensations of movement. They are experiences rich with meaning, layered with emotion, populated with imagery that seems to come from somewhere deeper than the vestibular system. People dream of falling from specific places, from cliffs they have never visited, from buildings they have never entered, from airplanes and mountains and bridges that exist nowhere in waking life. They dream of falling towards specific destinations. into water, into darkness, into cities spread out below like maps of light. They dream of falling alone, falling with others, falling while someone watches from above. The falling dream is not just a sensation but a story, and stories carry meaning that cannot be reduced to the firing of neurons. Perhaps this is why the falling dream has proven so resistant to simple explanation. It exists at the intersection of body and mind, physiology and psychology, the mechanical workings of the brain, and the mysterious depths of human meaning-making. To understand it fully, we would need to understand not just how the brain generates the sensation of falling, but why that sensation attaches itself to particular images, particular emotions, particular moments in our lives. The body remembers falling. This is one of the oldest memories we carry, written into us from the very beginning of life. Every infant, long before it can walk or speak or understand the world in any conscious way, responds to the sensation of falling with alarm. If you support a baby's head and then suddenly let it drop a few inches, the arms will fly outward, the fingers will spread, the face will contort in distress. This is the Moro reflex, one of the most primitive responses built into the human nervous system, a legacy from a time before memory, before thought, before anything we would recognize as self. The Moro reflex appears to be an evolutionary remnant, a survival mechanism inherited from our primate ancestors. For an infant carried by its mother through the branches of trees, the sensation of falling would have been an urgent emergency. The arms flying outward would help the baby grasp at fur, at branches, at anything that might arrest the fall. The cry of distress would alert the mother to catch her child before it was too late. We lose the Moro reflex as we grow older. By 6 months or so, it has typically disappeared, replaced by other reflexes, other ways of responding to the world. But perhaps something of it remains buried deep in the nervous system, ready to resurface in moments of vulnerability. Perhaps the falling dream is, in part, the adult echo of that infant alarm, the body remembering a danger it faced before the mind was old enough to form memories, a fear so ancient that it has no words, only sensation. This would help explain the peculiar quality of the falling dream, its combination of vividness and vagueness. We feel the fall with absolute certainty, yet we often cannot say where we are falling from or why. The dream seems to come from somewhere before language, before narrative, before the organizing structures that usually shape our experience. It is pure sensation, pure emotion, a fragment of something older than thought, and yet the mind, being what it is, cannot leave the sensation alone. It wraps the falling in story. It provides a cliff to fall from, a darkness to fall into, a reason for the descent. The body contributes the raw material, the sensation, the fear, the physical reality of the plunge, and the mind shapes it into meaning, into narrative, into something that can be remembered and wondered about and interpreted. Perhaps this collaboration between body and mind is what makes the falling dream so universal. Every human being has a body that knows what falling feels like, that responds to the sensation with ancient alarm, and every human being has a mind that seeks meaning, that cannot experience anything without trying to understand it. The falling dream emerges from the meeting of these two realities, a place where physiology and psychology intertwine so completely that they cannot be separated. We fall in our dreams because our bodies remember falling. We dream of falling because our minds cannot let the sensation pass without comment, and we wake from falling dreams changed in some small way, reminded of something we usually forget, that we are creatures of flesh as well as thought, that our minds are housed in bodies that have their own wisdom, their own memories, their own ways of knowing the world. The ancients did not have the language of neuroscience, of vestibular systems and amygdalae and REM matonia, but they understood, in their own way, that dreams were not purely mental events. They felt the racing heart, the sweating palms, the full body shock of waking from a terrible fall. They knew that whatever dreams were, they happened not just in the mind, but in the living, breathing, trembling body. Perhaps that knowledge is one of the things the falling dream preserves for us. In a world that often treats mind and body as separate things, the falling dream insists on their unity. You cannot think your way out of the fall. You cannot reason with the sensation. You can only experience it fully and completely, with every fibre of your being. And then you wake, and your body slowly remembers that it is lying safe in bed, and the fear fades, and you return to the comfortable illusion that you are a mind that happens to have a body, rather than a body that dreams. There is a story, perhaps apocryphal, about a man who had the same falling dream every night for 30 years. He would find himself at the edge of a great cliff, the wind pulling at his clothes, and then he would step forward into nothing. The fall would last an eternity, the ground rushing up to meet him, and he would wake just before impact, gasping, clutching at his sheets, his heart pounding against his ribs like something trying to escape. For 3 decades, this dream pursued him. He tried everything, sleeping pills and therapy, meditation and prayer, changing his diet and his mattress and the direction his bed faced. Nothing worked. Every night, the cliff. Every night, the fall. Every night, the terrible awakening. And then, one night, something different happened. He stood at the edge of the cliff as he always did. He felt the wind as he always did. He stepped forward into the void as he always did. But this time, as he fell, a strange thought occurred to him. I have done this before. I have done this 1,000 times. I know how this ends. And with that recognition came a shift. The terror did not exactly disappear, but it loosened its grip. He was still falling, but he was also watching himself fall. Aware that this was a dream, aware that he had survived this descent countless times before, and in that awareness he found a kind of freedom. He did not wake before hitting the ground. For the first time in 30 years he let the dream continue. He fell, and the ground came closer and closer, and then he passed through it, like mist, like memory, like something that had never been solid at all. He passed through the ground and kept falling, but now the fall felt different. It felt like descent rather than disaster. It felt like going somewhere rather than being destroyed. He woke gently, without gasping, without clutching, and he never had the dream again. Whether this story is literally true matters less than what it teaches. Across cultures and centuries, those who have thought deeply about dreams have arrived at a similar insight. Our relationship to the falling dream is not fixed. We are not merely passive recipients of whatever terrors the sleeping mind serves up. We have choices, even in dreams. We have agency, even in the midst of falling. The contemplatives of Tibet developed practices for maintaining awareness during sleep, for recognizing the dream state while still within it. They called this dream yoga, and they considered it an advanced spiritual discipline, a way of practicing liberation in the most challenging of circumstances. If you could remain conscious while dreaming, they taught, you could learn truths about the nature of mind that were invisible in waking life. You could discover that the self who falls is itself a kind of dream, no more solid than the cliff or the void. The lucid dreamers of the modern West have arrived at similar practices through different routes, using techniques of reality testing, of intention setting, of waking briefly in the night and returning to sleep with awareness. They have learned to recognize when they are dreaming and to exercise choice within the dream. For many of them, the falling dream has become not a nightmare but an opportunity, a chance to practice courage, to explore the limits of the possible, to discover what happens if they simply refuse to be afraid. Some report that when they become lucid in a falling dream, they find they can fly. The fall transforms into flight, the terror into exhilaration, the helplessness into power. Others report that they land safely, touching down in places they could never have imagined, gardens and cities, oceans and forests, realms that exist nowhere in waking life but feel, in the moment, more real than anything they have ever known. Still others report that they continue falling, but the falling itself changes. It becomes a journey rather than an emergency, a passage rather than a catastrophe. They fall through layers of reality, through memories and possibilities, through the accumulated sediment of their own lives. And somewhere in that descent they find something they did not know they were looking for. These experiences suggest something remarkable about the human mind, that we are not simply at the mercy of our dreams, that consciousness can persist even in the deepest sleep, that the meaning of any experience, even one as primal as falling, depends in part on how we meet it. But what of those who do not practice lucid dreaming, who have never heard of dream yoga, who simply wake in the night with the familiar terror and do not know what to do with it? Is there anything in this ancient wisdom that can help the ordinary dreamer, the person who falls in their sleep and wakes afraid? Perhaps the first teaching is simply this: you are not alone. The falling dream is one of the most common experiences in human life. Across all cultures, all centuries, all conditions of existence, people have fallen in their dreams and woken, wondering what it meant. Whatever you are feeling in the aftermath of such a dream, the fear, the confusion, the strange lingering sense of having been somewhere important, millions of others have felt the same thing. You are part of a vast community of falling dreamers, stretching back to the very origins of human consciousness. The second teaching is that the falling dream, for all its terror, is not dangerous. You will not die from dreaming of falling. Your heart will not stop if you hit the ground. These old folk beliefs, however widespread, have no basis in reality. The falling dream may feel catastrophic, but it is only a dream. Your body is safe in bed, breathing, resting, doing the quiet work of restoration that sleep provides. The fall is real in the sense that you experience it, but it cannot harm you. The third teaching is that the falling dream may be trying to tell you something, not in the sense of a specific prophecy or warning. The dream is probably not predicting that you will fall from an actual cliff, but in the sense of an emotional communication, a message from some part of yourself that does not have words. If you are dreaming of falling, it may be worth asking, where in my waking life do I feel like I am losing my footing? What ground has shifted beneath me? What am I afraid of losing? What would it mean to let go? These questions do not have easy answers, and the falling dream will not provide them directly, but the dream may be an invitation to ask, a nudge from the unconscious toward reflections that the busy waking mind has not had time to pursue. In this sense, even a frightening dream can be a gift, not a pleasant gift perhaps, but a useful one. The fourth teaching is the hardest, and perhaps the most important. Sometimes, the only way forward is down. The falling dream may be pointing towards something that the waking self has been avoiding, some descent that needs to happen, some letting go that has been postponed too long. The mystics and the psychologists, the shamans and the dream researchers have all noticed that transformation often requires a kind of death, a release of old identities, old certainties, old ways of being that no longer serve. The falling dream may be an image of this necessary surrender, this willingness to let the ground disappear and trust that something will catch you, or that you will learn to fly, or that the landing, when it comes, will be softer than you feared. In the Sufi tradition of Islamic mysticism, there is a concept called fana, annihilation, the dissolution of the individual self in the vastness of the divine. The mystics who pursue this state describe it in terms that sound remarkably like falling. The surrender of control, the release of everything solid, the terrifying and liberating experience of discovering that there is no ground, that there never was a ground, that the self you thought you were was always already falling through infinite space. This is not an easy teaching. It asks more of us than most of us are ready to give. But perhaps the falling dream, in its own small way, offers a taste of this possibility. Perhaps it reminds us night after night that we are not as solid as we think, that the ground we stand on is always shifting, that the only true security lies in learning to be at home in the falling itself. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote of the need to live the questions, to hold the great mysteries of existence without demanding immediate answers, to let the questions themselves become a kind of home. Perhaps the falling dream is one of these questions, a mystery that cannot be solved but only lived. A koan that the sleeping mind presents to us again and again, inviting us to go deeper, to fall further, to discover what waits at the bottom of the dark. We began this journey by asking what it means when you dream of falling. We have travelled through centuries and across continents, through temples and laboratories, through the wisdom of ancestors and the theories of scientists. We have heard from those who believed the falling dream was a message from the gods, and from those who believed it was a misfire in the nervous system. We have encountered the gates of horn and ivory, the archetypes of the collective unconscious, the evolutionary echoes of our primate past. And what have we found? Perhaps only this, that the falling dream is too rich, too ancient, too deeply woven into human experience to be captured by any single explanation. It is body and mind, physiology and meaning, terror and invitation. It is one of the oldest dreams we have, and it will probably be one of the last. As long as there are humans to sleep and wake and wonder, there will be falling dreams. Tonight, when you close your eyes, you may find yourself at the edge of that familiar cliff. The wind may pull at you, the void may open beneath your feet, and you may fall, as so many have fallen before you, through darkness that has no name toward a destination you cannot see. If that happens, remember, you are not alone. Remember, you are safe. Remember, this dream has something to show you if you are willing to look. And remember, perhaps, the old teaching of the dream people. The falling spirits love you. They are attracting you to their land. Relax. Let go. See where the fall takes you. You might discover that you have been falling all along, and that falling, after all, is just another way of flying.